study. This is a pilot study, how informed is trauma informed. It's the juxtaposition of perspectives of school administrators concerning this whole idea of trauma-informed school policy and the Every Student Succeeds Act. So when you look at these pictures, someone just give me some emotions that you see. Or baby. Anything else? Anything that comes to your mind when you look at these images?
Yeah.
Shocking. Trauma. Anger.
Sadness.
Sadness. Okay, so all of these things are definitely things that when students enter into a school building, they are bringing them in with them. So I find it very important that this whole idea of trauma-informed care or mindfulness, there are many different words that people use to describe what it actually is that we are presenting with our students every day in the classroom. Found it important that we bring the perspectives of these school administrators who are actually serving this population into fruition. So the overview of my study, I am definitely focusing on trauma. However, there are several words that I want to make sure that I define as to not get them confused with the medical terminology that is often used to describe trauma. So when I'm looking at it in this particular study, I am looking at it from the view of toxic stress. So this toxic stress is defined as this unpredictability and the feeling of horror and helplessness that comes to students who are experiencing the things that we just saw in those particular images that are traumatic. And what it is being found is that there are things that are directly influencing their brain development and their health. And then I'm also looking at adverse childhood experiences, and those are the Substance Abuse Mental Health Agency actually came up with this list of 10 things that most students experience within a school. However, the main three were, of course, abuse, family dysfunction, and things that they are experiencing within their household dysfunction. So those things are very important when we're looking at the way that school administrators are dealing with them. And then I'm also looking at the trauma-informed strategies that are suggested to be within public school curriculum that is being defined in the Every Student Succeeds Act. And then particularly I'm looking at an urban setting because research shows that children are exposed to higher risk of trauma within these types of settings. And then the stakeholders, of course, that I've mentioned, our principals, teachers, superintendents, particularly in this study, I will focus on administrators because the place that this was done, they have direct influence on the way that this trauma-informed care is implemented within schools. However, depending on where, if this study were recreated, it could of course be in the hands of superintendents or other policymakers. So I'm really focusing on those individuals who have the choice to provide trauma-informed care. So the problem statement. When children are in school, they are expected to learn. However, when you have homelessness, abuse, neglect, and these other adverse childhood experiences, trauma creates barriers within this process. So what research has shown is that for children who are experiencing this traumatic experience over and over again, if they don't have adequate parental and other support, they are, of course, the response is that their brain development is adversely affected. So the purpose for this phenomenological study is to understand the perspectives of school administrators in the K-12 schools and those perspectives that they have toward trauma-informed schools and school policy. The guiding research question for this study is how do the perspectives of school administrators and their understanding of trauma-informed school policy influence trauma-informed strategies in schools. So I've kind of already talked about the significance of the research, but just to give you some of the numbers, 68% of children experience at least some form of trauma. The seminal study that was conducted by the Center for Disease Control found that most students experience these adverse experiences, but what's more daunting is that 64% of people experience at least one, and then 22% of this population experience 3 or more. And if you look at what those 10 things are, we must, as school administrators, address those issues. So I'm looking, my epistemology for this particular study is being done through a social constructivism. And I found it important to do that because I want to make sure that as a researcher, I am looking at those individuals who are actually experiencing this phenomenon. So the fact that I chose to go into an urban environment and actually get the voice of those school administrators is important, because just taking from some quotes here, putting the cultural competence levels of public servants can potentially increase civic engagement and social trust among ethnic and minority populations. Looking at the different studies that have been done concerning trauma is very important that there is cultural competence in the things that these students are actually experiencing. And then just looking at a school's culture, it has more influence on life and learning in the schoolhouse than the president of the country, the State Department of Education, the superintendent, the school board, and even the principals, teachers, and parents can ever have. That came from the founder of the Principal Center at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. So it's important that we actually examine the culture and have the voice of those school administrators. The theoretical framework, the way that it was actually decided what theoretical framework I would apply to this study, when I was looking at comparisons to suburban and rural districts, urban school districts are frequently marked by higher concentrations of poverty, greater racial and ethnic diversity, larger immigrant populations, all of those things that typically we should provide more support. So I chose to look at it through a critical race theory. One of the lead educators, David Gilborn, asserts that public policies that are present in white communities and students most often represent a tacit intentionality on the part of those who are the makers and keepers of public policy, the majority of whom are white and male, and this is not the population that is typically being addressed when we're looking at, when we're looking within research on in urban areas. So in examining public policies, its intentionality created and enforced to maintain inequality, and policymakers understand but never explicitly acknowledge the impacts that these policies can have on particularly students who are of these specific social groups that are in urban environments. So one of the tenets that I particularly focus on is meritocracy, that assumes that basically all students are on this level playing field. I address within that historical trauma, past policies, and the way that these policies are actually legalized discriminations. And then bringing in what federal policy actually says these administrators should be providing. There are two subsections within ESSA that specifically target trauma. It talks about when and how you're supposed to refer affected students who have experienced trauma, and then actually providing links to appropriate treatment and intervention services for these students. So that's what the policy says. This policy was presented to these school administrators when they were interviewed. And my literature review, there are two emerging themes: the adverse effects of trauma, and of course, trauma-informed policy and the training of school administrators. I'm not going to go through all of these just to keep note of time, but again, just talking about how trauma affects a child's health and development, but also the way that we actually deal with these adverse effects and what they look like when they show up in school. So you have more students who are mislabeled with ADD, opposition to defiant disorder, and of course, conduct disorders. So from that, you look at the rate of discipline, the rate of suspensions, all of those things can be brought up when we're looking at those adverse effects of trauma. The more that they experience, of course, the more you see these types of things. And then just looking at the training of these particular school administrators and what that looks like. So one quote that I do want to pay attention to, when it talks about it doesn't make sense to diagnose a young person with PTSD because they are re-experiencing trauma. What they're seeing happening in children's brains and bodies because of the recurring toxic stress in their bodies is more complex than what we see in soldiers. So the reoccurring toxic stress, so if school administrators are not trained, of course, these types of trauma are going to continually be experienced. And then my methods. So the way the participants were selected was done through a snowball sampling. There was a semi-structured interview that approximately lasted between 15 and 20 minutes of experience. It addressed their years of experience, their personal perspectives on trauma, their views on federal policy, and then any opinions on their influence on points of trauma-informed care. I've already talked about that it was definitely a qualitative research study because I found it very important to include voice in this topic. And then the findings that I found, there was a lack of exposure, roles of psychological attitude, which I will address, and then an optimism for implementation. So this was some of the things that were said by some of my participants. I can tell you where to find the policy. I don't know how the policy actually plays out in school and what the responsibilities are. I'll be quite frank, as a school administrator, even as a teacher, I did not receive any training on trauma. So this shows that there is definitely a lack of exposure and training. The role of the psychological attitude is actually what I mean here is that the participating educators identified their main influence of current trauma-informed strategies as pertaining to their actual personal experiences. And then my conclusion, the trauma-informed care is done at the macro level. Current school administrators and their personal complement the literature that proves the importance of trauma-informed schools. However, trauma-informed training has not been implemented in schools with fidelity, as there is a lack of exposure to policy and evidence-based and effective strategies. And I also was able to look at some of the current discipline models, which I find, looking at it through a CRT lens, it remains in the personal experiences and expertise of school personnel who are disproportionately white. And the implications here are that there must be a strategic implementation of policy when we're talking about trauma-informed care. It must be progress without scrutiny, because of what I wanted to make sure that my research does not add to the litany of pathology about what it looks like for students who are experiencing these trauma in an urban environment, but actually providing progress to what we should do as a result of that. And then the teaching strategy and demanding critical thinking when we're talking about the way that this implementation is actually done, because trauma-informed care does remain in the personal experiences and expertise of school personnel. So we have to be careful not to push in policy when we have people who are there every day experiencing it and providing those supports to